Let's finish it.
Coming in, flex. I just wanna win, LABB, who we running with, 2233, I'm on 10 again, state your name.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of The Closing Pitch. My name is Spiker Helms, and this is a show about people, culture, and how to create a winning lifestyle. I am sitting pleasantly in our new podcast studio. We actually have a table. And it's actually a table. It's not like this like fake
sweet table. It wasn't the Amazon cardboard box we talked about.
And it's not
podcast.
one of those tables that you bring out to your family get together like we did back in the day, back in March. We actually have a nice oak table that was built by the fine people in Washington, Missouri.
Smells of rich mahogany.
It smells like the forests of Franklin County.
Our boy Trent Limeculer, who works for the Tigers, had this thing put together, finished, built. It's beautiful. It's awesome.
And right now we're still in the moving phase. If anyone is familiar with just moving into anything in general, it's literally a process. Unless you have nothing and you're a college student, you just literally walk into your apartment and you're like, hey, I'm ready to go.
True.
But with a baseball facility, you can imagine what has to go into it, especially when it's a 20,000 square foot facility.
Yeah, you're going to hear a bunch of nails being knocked in and TVs being put up in the background, but that's all right. It's a process. It's getting there, man.
So you have a picture up here from Twitter on our big TV. What is it?
All right, so it's the MLB playoffs, and right now the Dodgers and the Braves are playing, and the Astros and the Rays are playing. And I was scrolling through Twitter today, and I saw a really cool photo of, and I didn't watch this game, so I actually really have nothing to reference here other than I would assume that a home run was hit. But I saw a photo of the Braves dugout with Ronald Acuna Jr. just jumping for joy, like the most excited look and jump that I've ever seen in my life. And the caption on this Twitter post says, if your stud is this kind of a teammate and loves playing the game this much, everyone is automatically better. Culture creators.
You know what's a big shame of sports right now is that I feel like the athlete-wise, this is the best it's ever been when it comes to young athletes and big-name guys that are just now emerging. We're going to look back at this time, and we're going to be like, holy smokes, I can't believe we missed the era of Acuna Jr. when he was young, or Mike Trout when he was in his prime. It sucks because the viewership is completely down. Their numbers are not where they are supposed to be. And when looking at him and how he plays, obviously we get a front row seat because they play the Cardinals, and we see them quite a bit throughout the year. And when I remember when he first came up, I was like, this player he's fun to watch.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very fun to watch. It's similar to, who's the second baseman for the Chicago Cubs, that shortstop?
Javi Baez.
Yes. And when he made that World Baseball Classic on the scene, when he made that like
where Molina
tag,
threw him and he was no-look tagging.
Oh, it was awesome.
Yeah.
Because you do that stuff when you're practicing, but then when you actually see it put out into play, you're like, wow, we are actually getting into an era where baseball is going to be at its best.
Oh, for
when it comes to athletes, obviously it's hard to argue when you have the 80s and the 90s, and then obviously the home run race, and then you had Barry Bonds. Those were very fun years as a fan, minus the steroids, obviously, if you're either or. But I mean, if you talk about just baseball wise, it was really fun to see all those home runs being hit. And then you have Kerry Wood throwing all those strikeouts. But I think this era, when you look back at it, this is going to be the most athletic era ever in MLB history.
What these guys are able to do on the field these days is just insanity. I mean, they're running faster than ever. They're throwing harder than ever. They're hitting balls further than ever before on a more rapid pace than ever before.
And MLB is the most diverse it's ever been, ever.
Oh, yeah.
In my opinion. I don't know what the numbers are, just from perspective and looking at the league in general. You have the Dominicans, you have Puerto Ricans, you have the Koreans, you have the Chinese. This is a world game now. And it's really fun to watch, and especially looking at this picture right here, which I love the coach who put this out here, at Trevor Flo. I don't know how.
Don't know who he is.
I have no idea if he's a good follow or not. But the picture that he posted, which was 10:35 on October 15th, with Acuna Jr. literally jumping for joy out of the dugout. This is the type of stuff that baseball needs more of, and needs more of this culture. And I'm hoping that the higher ups in MLB are promoting this. I'm thinking they are, because we're starting to see more of it. And that's what the sport needs, because I love baseball, but baseball is on a decline right now.
For sure.
And they're fighting for the NBA. Luckily for baseball, NBA struggled this year, in my opinion, when it came to sports and watching them and having the viewership that they have. But if you talk about at a level of culture, more kids they know who the NBA stars are than the MLB stars. They should be putting Acuna Jr., they should be putting that picture all over and plastering it all over the place. And they shouldn't be mad when people copyright it and post it on the internet, because this is what people want to be a part of. Every kid that sees this picture, man, they'll say, man, baseball must be fun.
That's what that picture says, right? Mm-hmm. And what that picture also says is that guy's the star, the dude for the Braves, right? He is their franchise player. And he is celebrating somebody else's successes like it was his own. Like, you can look at that picture over and over, Spike, and you couldn't put more ounces of joy in that photo. Like, that guy is genuinely playing it. Like, that's how I jumped around when, I was a kid. That's exactly how I looked when I was a kid, just full of enjoyment, excitement, etc. That's how he's playing this game. That's how the game should be representative. And what the quote says is, if you're a teammate of his, right, and you see this dude who, again, is a bona fide star, the guy in the clubhouse, if your teammates see how excited he is for somebody else to hit a bomb, doesn't that make that culture just 10 times better?
That's the controllable that a lot of players don't realize that they have. It's one of the best controllables that you can. It'll literally change your mood. If you're having a bad day and you're able to force yourself to get out of the dugout right when someone gets a hit, or force yourself into giving a high five when you really don't feel like giving a high five, or even if that player is competing for your position, you're able to go out there and give them a high five, a genuine one, not one of those ones where I'm giving you a high five right now, but I really hope that you mess up.
Right.
That is what will literally change your mood, and you can be a promoter. And managers and coaches, if you are at the higher levels, they'll keep you on the team just because of that. Even if you're a fringe player, they'll keep you.
Well, let's look at this situation. So how many teams have you coached where you just watch how the team will follow the best player or the best players, and whatever their mood is that day and whatever their actions are that day, that's how that team's going to be, right? If that guy's having a bad day and he's showing it and he's letting it be known, the team probably is kind of follow it, right? They're all going to be quiet. They're not going to really talk. They're not going to really, do it. That guy's going off, having a great day, loving life, being excited, doing the high fives like you're saying. Well, the team's going to follow, right? So think about the culture that Acuna is creating with just this moment. It's infectious. It is something that it can't be replicated, right? And it's going to lead to a lot of momentum going forward. And that's what I think those players need to understand, and the coaches need to understand, is that those top-end players on that team, you got to understand that you're always being watched. You're always trying to be emulated by the other guys. So even if you're having your worst day, you can't show it. Not if you want to have a good culture.
The second to last week of the fall, Trent's team. By the way, there's a fly in here, and I don't want a Mike Pence situation where the fly lands on my head and I'm talking. But the second to last week for Trent's team in the fall, one of our catchers, I won't name him, really good player, very good player. I enjoy coaching him. He's one of those guys that it fits the same mold that I was. I want to be very, very stringent. I want to pound the pavement. I'm going to slide hard. I'm going to do whatever I can to win the game. He's like that. He has that attitude.
Yep.
but he wears his emotions on his sleeve, which again, as a coach, we had one of those players. He knows who he is, Will Doherty. Gave him a little shout out. I love the kid to death, but he knows how to handle his emotions to a certain extent, and he's able to feed off of that. And he really promotes that strong culture. He is at a very good level at that. And he still has ways to go. I'm very interested to see what happens after college.
Sure.
Because he's going to develop into a very nice player. This same player is younger than him, grinding his teeth, and really working on his craft. And he's very, very strict on himself. But what happens is that when he's very hard on himself, he lets everyone know how hard he is on himself. Mm-hmm. And that's where you need to kind of draw it back a little bit. This is completely different than what Acuna Jr. did. He was excited for his teammates, and he's had some issues in his young career. Mm-hmm. Was it Bobby Cox?
Yep.
Bobby Cox.
I think so, right?
I think it was Bobby Cox, one of the managers. I forgot who it was. Or maybe it was Freddie.
It was Freddie.
Yeah, Freddie. He ended up showing his emotions on the sleeve, and literally he took him out of the game in the middle of the game, young in his career. This is when he was like 18 or 19. And that probably helped him. They said, we want more of this. We want more of you jumping up and down in the dugout. Now, it's not to say that he has these bad days. I'm sure that he's kind of a roller coaster at times.
Sure.
But that's when, if you're able to bring in those guys and stop those lows from being super low, but really giving them the sky as the limit when it comes to them being super happy, that's really going to catapult, and people are going to gravitate towards them. Where a lot of coaches go wrong is they try to even keel them out to be more straight lined.
Right.
Which you're going to have those players on the team. There's going to be more of those straight line.
There's going to be way more of those
There's going to be
guys.
more straight line.
Oh, yeah.
Where a lot of coaches go wrong, in my humble opinion, is that they try to straight line those players. I don't want to do that. I want to give them the emotional high, and I want them to ride that emotional high as long as they possibly can. This is what Will was really good at. And his emotional lows, we worked on that.
Yep.
Hey, your emotional low is being very, very loud right now. You need to tone it down a little bit. You need to bring your energy level up, even though you don't feel that way. And I felt at the end of the year, he did that. And we played a lot better baseball at the end of the year, which obviously we won the championship, the Premier Championship. And I don't think we would have done that if it wasn't for his lows being not super low. They were actually higher and more straight lined.
100%. 100%. Especially with guys like him who play with that type of attitude and energy. I mean, you have to pick those lows up, but it is such an infectious deal. Like, I mean, that whole last week when we went on that run, and it was a lot because of him, but it was because him and a couple others brought the energy level up of that team, and just that was the most fun they've had playing baseball, right? Can you
hold on, time out?
Yeah.
Let's give some of these viewers don't know, or listeners don't know, the backstory of how this club is set up.
Okay.
So we are obviously a travel team, go to tournaments, but we are part of an organization called Premier Baseball. We're also part of Midwest Premier. Some clubs are part of these bigger organizations because they want to play for a championship. They want to know who's the best of the best. And we have really strong relationships with various clubs throughout the country. And we devote 1 week or multiple weeks to go to certain locations to play these teams. And at the end of the year, for our 17U class, we have a league, or I wouldn't call it a league, a body of people that's called Premier Baseball. This has been around since the early 2000s and has produced a lot of MLB draft picks and a lot of Division I, Power 5 conference type of players. And so this is like the mega deal for us when you're able to go. We have it in Joplin, Missouri. And for us, that is a big deal for us because we are playing the best of the best from our body of teams that we are associated with.
Yep. So that whole week, like I think we've referenced it in past podcasts, but we came out and just got whacked in that first game, and emotions could not have been lower. Just immediately thought, well, this week's not going to go very well. And And we made a point at the end of that game to talk about how we were going to deal with more adversity throughout that week, and how we deal with it is going to define how we end up going. It's either going to go down and we're going to leave on Saturday, or it's going to go up and we're going to possibly win this thing. And it's up to them on how they go about it. So I felt like a couple guys, Will included, and a couple of the other guys just brought that energy level every single time after that day. And you could tell because, man, it was a loose environment. It was a fun environment. Boys were genuinely excited for everybody else on that team and how they were having success, which if you want to have a good culture, that is your number one thing. We talk about getting off that island of me and celebrating each other's successes. Well, that's what they did. And that's what, when I talk about any good team that I've coached, we've had that element in those dugouts on those teams. Those guys are excited for their friends, their teammates, when they hit a home run, just as if they hit the home run. And that's what you're seeing in this photo. That's why I love this photo, because you look at the other guys. I mean, they are all so, obviously it's a big game and it's a big situation, but that's what team sports are all about. And if you're a coach listening, that's the type of culture you want to push, you want to talk about. I can't tell you how many times over the years I've literally sat here and talked about that island. Get off that island, fellas. Don't be worried about yourself. Be worried about everybody else.
As a coach, you have to recognize your team. That's the biggest thing when you first have that meeting. And if you're in youth sports, high school sports, you have to have that parent meeting in the beginning to lay down to eliminate all those assumptions and make sure that everyone is on the same page, because some people are coming into it a little bit different than other people. But the first week should be you evaluating. Obviously, you're trying to teach them and you're testing them and seeing how you kind of mesh with each other. But that first week, you got to figure out who are these people? Mm-hmm. What type of attitude do they have? What's the vibe? Does it have a leader? Do we need to insert a leader? Who can I promote to be a leader? Who's the clubhouse guy or girl? Mm-hmm. Who's the cancer? Who's the one that's going to be a negative Nancy? And how do I bring them to our level so that we can all benefit from it? Because every team, I don't care who you are, every team, every culture has those people. Mm-hmm. You're going to have those different various people, and you have to figure it out. If you don't figure it out, you're in a world of hurt, and you are going to be run over as a coach. And your coaching staff has to be on the same page. That's one thing that I enjoyed coaching with you this past summer, is that we were both on the same page. I've been in years past where I've not been on the same page with an assistant coach, and it's been a train wreck. I literally had to feel like I was babysitting one of the coach as a player.
Right.
And it was not fun. But I've also had really good relationships like we had in this past season, where everything we're on the same page. When someone asks us a question, we have the same exact answer. It might be varied a little bit differently and said a little bit differently, but it's the same exact answer. When you're able to do that as a coaching staff, you're unstoppable.
Well, and I think that also allows you to just keep sending out the same messages. It's a constant same message over, because in today's culture, you're not going to be able to say something once, twice, 3 times, and guys just get it. They don't understand that. They need to hear it over and over and over. And it's not because of a lack of attention or a lack of ability to learn, but that's how you create a culture, right? Mm-hmm. It's saying the same vision, the same exact way you want the team to act over and over, and bringing up examples of how it's not happening and how it needs to change. And I felt like we went through that this summer. And again, it's a recipe that's kind of been going over and over and over again, and it's happened year in, year out. But that's how you build that culture, to where you find those guys, you make them play together as a team, and then ultimately you get to a position where you're playing for a championship to end the year. And I mean, there's gonna be a picture that's put up on our walls out here of one of our guys hitting a bomb in that championship game, and the whole team is surrounding home plate, and I don't think I've seen guys more happy for someone else. Mm-hmm. It's the coolest photo I've ever seen in my tenure here as a Tiger coach.
What's interesting about the game of baseball is it is a teacher itself.
Yep.
And it will humble you a lot faster. And let's kind of do a segue into the NFL and Randy Moss. Randy Moss had the same exact composure and exuberance that you see out of Acuna Jr. right here on this picture.
Mm-hmm.
And if you listen to any interviews of Randy Moss, he always mentioned not his Vikings coach, but he always mentioned Chris Carter, which was one of his wide receivers.
Yeah.
He never mentions the coach, and this is a very important point. And I don't know what the dynamics were on that team. I'm only speculating, so please take this with a grain of salt. But for me, when he ended up going to the Patriots, who did he talk about most? Talked about Bill Belichick. Then he talked about Tom Brady. Bill Belichick was first, then Tom Brady. Why was it not the same in the Minnesota Vikings? And if you realize, there were no problems in New England when he was there.
There's been very little problems there for a long time.
He did one dance where he mooned the fans, and ESPN made a huge debacle out of it. But after that, that was it. There was nothing else. And they call it the Patriot way. I wouldn't call it the Patriot way. I would call it the Bill Belichick way, because he's an excellent coach, and we've talked about him in the past. We've talked about it in different episodes. He is a very good communicator. He looks at the game, in my opinion, he looks at the game like a chessboard. He loves his players. You can tell that he loves his players.
Oh, yeah.
But he looks at each piece differently, and he places that person in the right spot at the right time so that they're able to get checkmate.
Well, and ultimately, again, he creates that culture that he wants. And everybody knows it. Everybody understands it. And everybody understands what they're expected out of. But if you ever listen to any of those players in an interview, if you ever watch them in a game, it's the same things we're talking about in this photo. It is literally the same. They are in it for each other. They are in it for the team. This is a team sport. This isn't golf. This isn't tennis. Mm-hmm. It's different. In those sports, you got to be about yourself. In baseball, the best teams are always in it for the team. The worst teams are always in it for the individual. That when you're only worried about yourself, when you're only living in that world, the ups and downs of your own actions, your own performance, it's a scary world. It's a bad world to be in.
So do you? I know we've had this conversation in the past briefly.
Okay.
Do you think the leaders, aka the coach, can manufacture culture?
Yes. I don't think you do. No.
I don't. I think they can only influence it. And I think the people that manufacture it are a group of people. It can't be 1 to 2 people that manufacture culture. They can influence it, but it takes a group of people to actually create the culture around it. Because you need the players that are, AKA, technically I'm using my quote hands right now, cancer. You need to get those cancer guys to be on board with you. And the only way to do that is to be able to influence other people around you that end up creating that culture. Because it can't take one person. I mean, besides Michael Jordan, but he had Scottie Pippen. So that's the big thing that I think is that it can only be influenced. It can't be manufactured.
But what I would say is that the idea has to come from somewhere, right? The idea has to start somewhere. Generally, that is with the coach, right?
I would agree with that, yes.
So maybe we're using the wrong term in terms of manufactured, but the idea starts there. The framework starts with the coach.
I totally agree with that.
He's got to lay out the expectations. He's got to nip the bad things in the butt when players get selfish, when players are all on that island of me. They got to nip it. They got to stop it. They got to talk about it. And they will slowly build that. And we always talk about we're going to go get one guy. One guy's going to come on my side. Now I've got 2. Then I'm going to get another guy. Now I got 3 dudes. And then all of a sudden, I've got half that team on my side. And now I got all these guys out there talking my vision, my expectations as a coach to the other teammates. So when they see something go bad, or they see some guy throw a helmet, or they see some guy just get down in the dumps, they're the ones picking them up. That's when I know I've got a team, by the way. When that situation happens where I don't have to be the bad guy, where I don't have to be the guy who walks up to a player and literally say, hey, you can't do that. I got John over here, who's my third baseman, being like, dude, come on, let's go.
If you're a coach or someone that's a higher up that's trying to figure out, hey, how do I actually get this thing going? Don't think about everything that you need to do. Simplify it down to 1 or 2 things, 1 or 3 things, and that's what you stand for, and that's what you're going to deliver. Example, whenever I was a head coach, I told the guys, and this is what I thought internally, was that we are going to be very, very hardworking, blue collar mentality, but we're going to be very creative in how we do it. That's literally what I thought. And if you saw any of our teams when I was coaching them, we were very hard nosed. We were very in the paint. We're going to slide hard. We're going to take you out. But we are very creative on pregame, very creative on the base paths, very creative during postgame. We did things different than everybody else.
Yep.
Example, Grand Park. I delayed a game, and our players were on board for it because we didn't get our pregame in. They wanted to move our time up, and I said, we're not doing it. And we stopped. We said, you told us our time is at 6 p.m. We are playing at 6 p.m. I cannot go earlier. Umpire got really mad at me.
I bet.
Parents ended up just sitting there and kind of BSing around, and they knew what we were doing. I get to home plate. I have my assistant coach go up there, and I end up going to my respective coach's box, and the umpire said, "Hey, you trying to big league me?" I was like, "No, I'm trying to get these kids better. Is there a problem?" The other team was very frustrated with it.
I bet.
We came out, 10-run them. Because we prepared how we prepared. You're not going to sacrifice that preparation. Because at the end of the day, those kids got better during that hour instead of us sitting around waiting for the game, not knowing if it's going to start early, not knowing if it's going to start late. I don't like that stall. I hate that stall.
Yeah.
If you tell me the time is at 6 p.m., we're starting at 6 p.m.
And again, that I know the team you're talking about, so I know that this is an actual correct answer, but what did that do for your culture? I mean, it had to just make it go through the roof.
Well, they were hard-nosed. They ended up realizing that the show doesn't start until we get on the field.
Yeah.
Where I feel like when you send that message of, "Oh, we'll cater to you," you're more defensive. Mm-hmm. You're not in that offensive mode. Now, you might disagree with me. You might be listening in your car right now, or taking a jog, or weightlifting, and you might be thinking, "Man, this guy's absolutely crazy." But I'm very big on culture. I'm very big on putting an idea in my players' minds and living off of that, because it puts you in an offensive mode, and you go out there and you can attack it. We were able to achieve higher than what expectations were. I remember getting a text from Aaron and yourself, and Aaron said, it was my first year coaching. This is the first year I ever coached. He's like, "You have the Ferrari, don't crash it."
Yep.
Now, and it was true. I had the Ferrari, and I thought it was the Ferrari. We might have not been a Ferrari. It might have been a Ford Focus. It could be. But we played like we were a Ferrari. We went out there, and we said, "We're the Tigers. Don't mess with us. We're going to go out there, and we're going to compete." Now, again, you got to put it in a respectful manner. Like when the umpire came up to me and said, "What's the deal? Were you trying to big league me?" I said, "No, just out here trying to get the kids better. That's it."
Right. Which is what it should be.
What it should be. Instead of, let's push it along because we have to meet this deadline. We have to meet this time because I have to get home for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the customer. I paid you money. You are umpiring my game. I'm not going to give you beef on the field. You call the game how you call it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to argue balls and strikes. I'm not going to argue if that was a close call or not because I know how hard that is.
Right.
Now, if it's a big blown out call, I'm going to ask you, "Hey, what'd you see?" That's it. That's all I got to know. What'd you see? And I got the answer, and I can tell my players. Now we know where we stand. Now we know when that play happens again, what we need to do. Again, that's where a lot of people, I think, go wrong with youth sports. You are a customer. They're trying to provide you with a service. My thought is when I go in there, I want to have a really good time. I want to be entertained. You tell me the game's at 6 o'clock, I'll be there at 6 o'clock. I'm ready to play. But if you force me and put me down a path of saying you have to be there for an hour early and we're starting an hour early without me knowing that, right, that's a huge issue. That is not a good customer service.
One of my biggest pet peeves. Can't stand it.
Yeah. So anyways, we literally went down a rabbit hole there.
We're a little different on here.
When it came to culture, but it's so important, guys. Like, no matter what you stand for, pick 1 to 3 words and really live that. really embody that. And all those words that I'm mentioning, which is the hard work, creativity, blue collar, that didn't just come from me. That came from the people around me when I was growing up. The thing that when I delayed that game, that's not me delaying the game.
Right.
That was my culture that created me.
Prepared you.
That prepared me for that moment to say, and have the confidence and say, I'm your customer. I expect this. We're going to get it on time. Your goal is to get the other game on time.
100%.
That's what it has to be. And I got that from my junior college coach. I got that from my high school coach. I got that from my youth coach. I got that from my dad. I got that from my uncle. All the big influencers in my life have produced those 3 words. Hard work, blue collar, creativity.
Well, we went down a rabbit hole, but that's because that's what culture is. You can go in so many different directions, but it is so important. If we could do 300 more podcasts on different types of culture and how to influence culture in one way or another, and that's great because that's a common core value of this show is to learn how to create that culture that you want, that winning culture, that winning lifestyle. This photo, to me, embodies it. I love this photo. We're going to post this out so you guys can see exactly what we're talking about. But it's infectious. It creates something that is the biggest, most positive momentum that you will ever feel. Okay? It's hard to even explain.
And I will say this. There's not a blueprint to a championship culture because if you look at all the championship teams, their cultures were different.
Well, they're different people.
Like, think about it. New York Yankees 98, totally different than the Cardinals of 2011.
Right.
Atlanta Braves possibly could be the next World Series champions. At a their staff is super young. That culture is very vibrant, young, and creative. You can tell that they're creative. And I could see why Ozuna went down to Atlanta.
Oh, yeah.
I could totally see it. Like, after when he said Atlanta, I was like, man, that sucks. Like, I wish we could have kept him. But the culture down there, he saw that. He knew the players on the staff. He's like, this is going to be a fun year. I bet you he was watching the playoffs when he got knocked out and was like, I want to be a part of that.
But you said it here earlier in the podcast. Every one of those players is different. Every one of the players that we coached this summer was different. We as coaches have to understand that. We have to understand how they tick and then somehow put that formula together to make that culture what we want it to be, right? And every formula is going to be different. There isn't a blueprint. There isn't one thing. It takes time. It takes sweat equity. It takes persistence, everything. And it keep hammering those core common beliefs down over, and do it in a manner that you're bringing in the we, not I, and it's going to be something special.
One last thing I want to point out is one of the teams that I was a part of, and I could go almost every year. I could go each culture and tell you how we were different and which one was successful and which was not. But I want to point out one that was very good. It was my last year for Legion baseball. And I end up making the decision to play Legion rather than playing club for that 1 year because I wanted to play with my friends for the last season. We had a couple college players that came down because they were young enough. But the manager on that team was an older guy, Schroeder, and he was very calm, cool, and collect, and was very passive. Not passive in a bad way, but more of reserved. Mm-hmm. And he managed it correctly. He just pointed the direction of where we wanted to go. Literally pointed the Death Star and said, this is where we're going. And that was it. He let the players do the thing because he knew that he had a catcher that was very excited, very, very out there, was able to put people in their place.
Yeah.
He caused a lot of drama at times. God love him. But he knew how to bring you back in and create that culture that he wanted.
Sure.
That's what you have to know as a manager is you have to know the pieces that are on your roster. And each year, if you are in our business, each roster is different and it's going to be different from year to year. You're not going to have that consistency. You only have 8 weeks to figure it out.
Right.
As a high school coach. One of our coaches, Ryan, said it best. I thought I had 4 weeks. I don't got 4 weeks. I got 1 week. I got 1 week to figure it out, and I got another week to set the tone even more, to really put it in place. I think that is a fabulous way of putting it together. As a youth coach, you have the luxury of creating your team, starting from scratch. Say you have a 7U team, you have a little fun, the 7U, you start growing with those players, 8U, 9U, then 10U through 14. Those are prime years where you're really going to understand your players because the players get their personality a little bit more. They get a little bit better with their skill sets. They're growing. They're still baby giraffes, but they're baby giraffes that can be molded. So understand your personnel. Know who your leaders are. Really promote that. Really influence that. Then know who your straight line people are. Who's in the middle. Who's very high. Who's very low. Who just stays even keel. And then you got to know, God love them, the ones that could have a negative influence. They're still really good players. They still need to be a part of that culture. You have to figure it out because every team has that negative person on there. No fault of their own.
Exactly.
What's your closing pitch?
My closing pitch is that no matter the talent on the team, no matter the situation, culture is key. Creating culture will elevate everyone's game. I'm not worried about the Ronald Acuñas of the world. Even though in this photo, he's the influencer. He's the guy who's leading the ship. He's at the front line going forward. He's being a positive influencer right now. I'm not worried about those guys. I'm worried about bringing everybody else up with that culture. We can make guys who have good average ability really, really good players because they believe they can, because they believe that culture, that their brothers who are on that team are all there for them. It will elevate everything that you do, and that would be the one thing that I consistently focus on more than the swing, more than how they throw, more than how they field. I would focus on that culture of that team day in, day out.
If you've had strong coaches, if you feel like you've had a very strong influencers around you and you have a really good base, do not be apologetic of who you are. Be very hard in the paint. Go strong with that. Have a lot of confidence in that and assess your pieces and really influence that culture so that culture can thrive and grow. Because when you are able to do that, it's going to be really, really fun. One of my college managers said it the best. He's like, I don't care what you do during the week or weekend. I know you guys are college kids, and I know you're going to have fun. But when you come to the ballpark, it's business. And if you don't produce, we have an issue. I love that. Gives me so much freedom. I know exactly where he stands. Now let's go execute.
Boom.
Guys, if you are a repeat listener, please give us a review, 5 stars preferably. Share this with a friend if you thought this conversation was interesting and you found value in it. That's how we are rating ourselves personally when it comes to this podcast. If you share it, it grows. If it doesn't, it just stays put. And we get to reassess and say, hey, we need to be a little bit better. So if you found this episode, the best thing for us, share this with a friend. If you are a new listener, this is a show about people, culture, and how to create a winning lifestyle. Someone shared this with you and said, hey, check these guys out. We appreciate you coming and visiting us for a brief moment. If you find this very interesting, give us a subscribe, or you could share it with a friend too, and then subscribe. So thanks, guys. I appreciate it, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
See you guys.
Thank you for watching or listening or both to The Closing Pitch. If you would like to get your closing pitch featured on the show, we use a podcasting app called Anchor where you can submit your statement or question via audio. Or what you can do is comment in the comment section of this post. We also accept direct messages. Please give us the A-OK if you do send us a DM to use your statement or question on the show. Last thing, please give us a review on your platform of choice. 5-star preferably, and we value your opinion, and this allows us to reach more people. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you in the next episode.